Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been working in healthcare for about 15 years now, but 10 years ago I was a technician at a freestanding emergency room in the suburbs. After finishing my medical training, I took this job because it seemed like a good stepping stone before moving to a bigger hospital. The pay was decent and the hours were manageable since we mostly dealt with minor cases. Our little emergency room was set up in a shopping center about 30 miles from the main hospital downtown. The whole point was to help people with smaller problems avoid the long drive into the city. We saw the usual stuff: broken bones from weekend sports, kids with high fevers, elderly folks who had taken a tumble, that sort of thing. Nothing too serious since we didn't have an operating room or intensive care unit. When paramedics got called for real emergencies, they would just drive straight past us to the trauma center. The emergency room layout was pretty standard, with all the patient rooms arranged around a central nurses station. This meant everyone could see what was happening when we had to rush around for serious cases. Most days were pretty quiet, which was exactly how we liked it. But this one Saturday afternoon changed everything. I was catching up on some paperwork when I heard commotion outside. A bunch of teenagers had been out riding four-wheelers in the muddy fields behind town. Apparently, one of the vehicles flipped over and completely crushed this kid's arm. Instead of calling an ambulance like any sensible person would do, these teenagers decided to drive their friend to our emergency room themselves. I'll never forget the sight of that poor kid walking through our doors. He was in complete shock, barely able to speak. His arm was destroyed from the elbow down to his fingertips. The skin had been completely stripped away and was just hanging there in tatters. One of his buddies was actually carrying the torn skin in a grocery bag like it was some kind of sick joke. All of us immediately dropped what we were doing and went into emergency mode. The doctors started shouting orders while the nurses prepped for blood transfusions. We needed to get this kid stable enough to transport to a real trauma center as fast as possible. The whole emergency room turned into controlled chaos, with everyone running around trying to save this teenager's life. The kid started panicking when the pain really hit him. The X-ray technician was literally having to hold him down while we got pain medication into his system. The doctor needed X-rays to send along with the patient when the helicopter arrived, so he told me to run down the hall and grab the portable X-ray machine from radiology. I was sprinting down the hallway when this woman in her 40s suddenly stepped out of her room and grabbed my arm. She had that look on her face that every healthcare worker learns to recognize: the entitled patient who thinks the world revolves around them. She demanded to know when the doctor was going to see her, complaining that she had been waiting for over 30 minutes. I tried to explain that we had a serious emergency happening right now and pointed back toward the nurse's station, where everyone was still working frantically on the injured teenager. You could hear all the medical equipment beeping and the staff calling out vital signs. It was pretty obvious that something major was happening. Karen insisted that she was there before the injured kid and that she couldn't wait all day. I explained that emergency rooms don't work on a first-come, first-served basis and that we see the sickest people first. I told her that waiting longer was actually a good thing because it meant there was someone else much worse than her. She called that nonsense and complained that her sinuses were killing her. She demanded that I go get the doctor right away. Behind us, we literally had a teenager who might lose his arm or worse, and this woman was complaining about her stuffy nose. The whole situation was so absurd that I almost laughed. I told her I wasn't going to do that and explained that the doctor was well aware of why she was there. If he hadn't seen her yet, it was because he had already decided that she could wait. She said that was unacceptable and demanded to speak to my manager. She threatened to report all of us for terrible patient care and was getting louder and more aggressive. I didn't have time for her tantrum, since every second I wasted arguing with her was another second that kid was suffering. I told her the manager was busy trying to save someone's life and that if she wanted to file a complaint, there were forms at the front desk. I pulled my arm away from her grip and ran toward radiology. Behind me, I could hear her screaming about how she was going to sue the hospital and get everyone fired. Several other patients in the waiting room were staring at her with disgust. I grabbed the portable X-ray machine and wheeled it back as fast as I could. The kid was finally calmed down enough for us to get the images we needed. Within 20 minutes, the helicopter landed in our parking lot and we had him loaded up with all his medical records and X-rays. When I got back to the main area, I noticed Karen was gone. One of the nurses told me she had stormed out about 10 minutes earlier, screaming about how she was never coming back and how we were all incompetent. She apparently demanded her copay back and threatened to leave bad reviews online. The front desk clerk just shrugged and said she'd seen it all before. She mentioned that Karen had been to our emergency room 3 times in the past month for minor issues like headaches and upset stomachs. Each time she complained about wait times and demanded to be seen immediately. About a week later, we got an update on the teenager. The trauma surgeons at the main hospital had managed to reattach most of the skin on his arm. He was going to have limited mobility and some nerve damage, but he'd be able to live a pretty normal life. His family sent us a thank you card for getting him stabilized so quickly. The same day we got that card, our manager showed us a 1-star review that Karen had left online. She wrote 3 paragraphs complaining about our unprofessional staff and how we ignored patients with real medical needs. She claimed her sinus infection was serious and that we were negligent for not treating her immediately. The manager just rolled his eyes and deleted the review. He said entitled patients like Karen were exactly why he was glad our emergency room had security cameras. If she ever tried to cause legal trouble, we had plenty of evidence of her behavior that day. I've been serving in the Army for about 3 years now, and let me tell you, nothing quite prepares you for dealing with entitled civilians like military training does. I just finished a long day at the base doing equipment maintenance and paperwork. My unit had been working on preparing for an upcoming deployment, which meant longer hours and more stress than usual. All I wanted was to grab some groceries and head home to my small apartment off base. I was still in my Army combat uniform because I hadn't had time to change after leaving the base. Usually I'd swap into civilian clothes, but I was tired and figured a quick grocery run wouldn't hurt. The uniform is pretty distinctive, digital camouflage pattern with my name tape, unit patches, and rank insignia clearly visible. You'd think it would be obvious I wasn't a grocery store employee, but you'd be wrong. Walking through the automatic doors, I grabbed a cart and started making my way through the store. I had a simple list: milk, bread, some frozen dinners for the week, and cereal. Nothing fancy, just the basics to get me through until my next day off when I could do proper shopping. I was standing in the cereal aisle, genuinely torn between 2 childhood favorites, when I heard someone clearing their throat aggressively behind me. A woman called out to me loudly, trying to get my attention. She kept repeating "excuse me" and calling me young man in an increasingly impatient tone. I turned around to see a woman who looked like she'd stepped straight out of the entitled customer handbook. She had that particular hairstyle, you know the one, and was wearing a jacket that probably cost more than my monthly housing allowance. Her face was already twisted into an expression of irritation. I politely acknowledged her and asked what she needed. She immediately launched into a demanding tirade about how she'd been trying to get my attention forever. She wanted to know where the organic almond milk was and told me not to give her a blank stare like I didn't know. She ordered me to hop to it and help her. This was clearly a case of mistaken identity, and I figured a polite correction would sort things out quickly. I explained to her politely that I wasn't actually an employee at the store, just another customer like her. Instead of the embarrassed apology I expected, her face got even redder. She accused me of lying and claimed she had seen me stocking shelves earlier. She called me lazy and demanded that I help her find the almond milk. I took a deep breath. Military training teaches you patience and de-escalation techniques. I've dealt with angry people before, though usually they were fellow soldiers having a bad day, not random civilians in grocery stores. I told her that there must have been some misunderstanding because I didn't work there. However, I offered to help anyway by suggesting that the almond milk should be in the next aisle over near the dairy section. You'd think offering helpful directions would calm her down, but apparently logic wasn't her strong suit. She got even angrier and asked how I dared to talk back to her. She demanded respect and ordered me to go fetch her almond milk. By this point, other shoppers had started to notice our conversation. A few were trying to pretend they weren't listening, but I could see them looking over. One elderly gentleman near the granola bars was openly staring with an amused expression. I decided to try humor to diffuse the situation. It works with my fellow soldiers sometimes. I pointed out that I wasn't even wearing the store's logo on my uniform. I joked that if anything I was advertising the US Army, not their latest deals on organic milk. A couple of nearby shoppers actually chuckled at that, but Karen was having none of it. She stepped closer, invading my personal space in a way that immediately put me on alert. She told me not to talk back to her and called me an insolent brat. Then she did something that crossed every line I have. She poked me hard in the chest with her finger. In the military, we're taught about appropriate responses to physical contact, and this was definitely entering that territory. I warned her that if she continued to harass me, I would have to take appropriate action. She scoffed and asked what I could do, sarcastically suggesting I call my manager. She threatened to have my job for this. I realized this woman was completely beyond reason. The best course of action was to disengage entirely. I started to turn away, planning to simply walk to a different part of the store and continue my shopping. Sometimes the best victory is just refusing to engage with crazy. But Karen wasn't done. When I turned my back, she completely lost whatever remained of her composure. She grabbed my shoulder with both hands and dug her nails in, trying to physically turn me around to face her. That was it. That was the moment this went from an annoying encounter to an assault. In the Army, we train extensively in hand-to-hand combat and self-defense. When someone grabs you from behind like that, your training kicks in automatically. I executed the basic shoulder throw, nothing fancy, just a simple defensive maneuver designed to break free from someone grabbing you from behind. Karen went over my shoulder and landed on the floor with a loud thud. The entire store went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Karen lay there on the linoleum, looking completely shocked that her actions had results. I apologized to her, saying I was sorry she had forced me to do that. I told her that maybe now she'd think twice before mistaking someone for an employee and treating them poorly. She didn't say a word, just lay there staring at the ceiling with her mouth open. The store manager came running over, clearly alarmed by the commotion. Several customers had already pulled out their phones, some to call the police, others to record what was happening. The manager asked what had happened there. I explained that this woman had mistaken me for an employee, and when I tried to leave after explaining I didn't work there, she physically grabbed me. I told him I used minimal force to defend myself. Multiple customers immediately spoke up to confirm my version of events. The elderly gentleman I'd noticed earlier was particularly vocal about how Karen had been harassing me and how I'd tried to help her despite her rudeness. One customer said the soldier had tried to help her even though she was being awful to him. Another confirmed that she had grabbed him first and he was just defending himself. A third witness said they saw the whole thing and that she was completely out of line. The police arrived within minutes. I provided my military ID and explained the situation thoroughly. The responding officers were professional and thorough in their investigation. One officer asked me to walk him through exactly what had happened. I gave them a detailed account of the entire encounter. Multiple witnesses corroborated my story and the store manager confirmed that the security cameras had captured everything. The paramedics checked Karen over. She was fine physically, just shaken up and apparently still in denial about her role in the situation. Karen shouted that this was outrageous and demanded they arrest me. She claimed I had attacked her for no reason. The officer told her that, according to multiple witnesses and the security footage, she had initiated physical contact and I had acted in self-defense. The security footage was clear. It showed me trying to walk away and Karen grabbing me from behind. It showed the minimal force I used and how I immediately stepped back after she fell. After reviewing everything, the officers determined that I had acted in legitimate self-defense. They didn't press any charges against me. However, because Karen continued to be belligerent and made threats, they did cite her for assault and disorderly conduct. When the paramedics helped Karen to her feet, she continued her tirade. She yelled that this was discrimination and threatened to sue everyone, the store, the police, and the army. The officer reminded her that she had the right to remain silent and suggested she use it. The store manager actually apologized to me for the incident and thanked me for handling it professionally. He also banned Karen from the store. The manager said he was sorry I had to deal with that situation. He complimented my military training and said it really showed. He mentioned that most people would have escalated that situation much worse. I finally got my groceries and headed home, though I ended up choosing neither cereal. The whole incident had kinda killed my appetite for childhood favorites. Over the next few days, I had to provide a statement to the police for Karen's court case. She was ultimately convicted of assault and had to pay a fine plus court costs. So I'm 17, just trying to finish high school and get ready for college. I've been working hard on my grades and planning my future. My mom has been super supportive through everything, helping me with college applications and just being there when I need her. She's honestly the best parent I could ask for. But there's this whole mess with my family that's been brewing for years. My uncle is 30 years old and has basically never worked a real job. He tried being a server at McDonald's like 14 years ago, but quit after a week because his parents let him. He has Asperger's syndrome, but instead of getting him proper help or therapy, my grandparents just let him sit in his room all day. He doesn't shower, gets high on his medications, and lives off welfare. The only people he really talks to are his parents and me. I guess I'm one of the few people who actually listens to him, so he's gotten pretty attached to me over the years. My grandpa is 65 and has been on disability for depression for years now. Look, I'm not saying depression isn't real or serious, but the way he handles everything in the family is just wrong. He's always dumping adult problems on me, like I'm supposed to solve them. Yesterday started off really good. I woke up feeling great, made myself a sandwich, had some coffee, did a little homework, and worked on my resume. It was one of those peaceful mornings where everything felt like it was going right. But then I got a text from my grandpa that completely ruined my day. The text basically said he needed to talk to me about something important regarding my uncle's future. He wanted me to call his brother, who I've only met twice in my entire life, to discuss what happens to my uncle after he and grandma die. I was immediately confused and uncomfortable. This felt way too heavy for someone my age to handle. I texted back trying to express that I didn't feel comfortable with this conversation, but he completely ignored my feelings. He kept pushing and insisting that this was something I needed to handle. I was getting more and more uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to tell my own grandfather to back off. I went to my mom because I was scared and confused. I showed her the texts and told her I didn't know what to say. She could see how upset I was getting about the whole situation. Then my grandpa called me. I was still unsure what to do, so I put it on speaker so my mom could hear what was happening. I answered and asked how he was doing, hoping maybe we could just have a normal conversation. But no, he immediately started venting about all his adult problems like he always does. He talks to me like I'm his therapist or something, which is really inappropriate. Then he got down to business. He didn't request or ask nicely. He straight up demanded that I call his brother so we could discuss where my uncle would go after he and grandma pass away. The way he said it made it sound like I had no choice in the matter. I told him that I was 17 and that this was an inappropriate thing to ask of me. I suggested that he should be speaking to my dad instead of me about this kind of serious family matter, but he brushed off my concerns completely. He said I would be 18 in a few months and that I should just do it. Then he said something that really crossed the line. He told me I was the only one he trusted with his family matters. That last comment really set my mom off. She was sitting across the room listening to this whole conversation, and when she heard him say that, she got absolutely furious. I don't remember her exact words because everything happened so fast, but she was not having it. My mom started yelling at him for asking these things of a kid who everyone knows has trouble saying no to people. She was angry that he didn't even think to talk to her first about this. She told him this was completely inappropriate and that she wouldn't stand for it. She kept going, telling him that my uncle is a 30-year-old man, and if he really can't function because of his condition, then that's what assisted living facilities are for. She made it clear that it would never be my responsibility to take care of him. My grandpa backed down pretty quickly after that. He apologized and hung up the phone, probably realizing he had messed up big time. After the call ended, I had a long conversation with my uncle about the whole situation. I told him I was glad to be his friend and that I cared about him, but it would never be my responsibility to take care of him when he's an adult. He said he understood, but then he mentioned something that made me realize this problem isn't going away anytime soon. My uncle said he knew I would give him a place to stay temporarily if the situation called for it. He's been really insistent lately about us being roommates when I become an adult. He brings it up constantly, like he's already planning his future around living with me. I can tell this is going to be an ongoing issue, and I'm probably going to have to be more direct with him soon. The whole situation made me realize how messed up my family dynamics are. My grandpa thinks it's okay to dump adult responsibilities on a teenager, and my uncle has been enabled his whole life instead of getting the help he actually needs. They've created this expectation that I'm somehow responsible for solving their problems, but my mom stepping in like that showed me what real support looks like. She didn't hesitate to defend me and set boundaries with my grandpa. She made it clear that I'm still a kid and that these adult problems aren't mine to solve. The next day, my grandpa called back and tried to act like nothing had happened. He started talking about family obligations and how I should understand that family takes care of family. But this time I was ready for him. I told him that my mom and I had already talked about this. I explained that I was focusing on school and college right now, and that my uncle needed professional help, not a teenage roommate. He tried to guilt-trip me by saying I was the only one my uncle trusted, and that my uncle didn't connect with other people like he connected with me. I stood my ground and told him that was exactly why this wasn't healthy for either of us. I explained that my uncle needed to learn to be independent, and I needed to build my own life. He tried to guilt-trip me a few more times, but I didn't give in. Eventually, he gave up and changed the subject. I think he finally realized that my mom wasn't going to let him manipulate me anymore. My uncle still texts me sometimes about apartment hunting together and talks about how great it would be if we were roommates. Each time I remind him that's not gonna happen. It's getting easier to say no, especially knowing my mom has my back. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.